Hello, and welcome to your Fairy God Mentor. This is the show that inspires, encourages, educates, and supports expectant couples who desire to confidently navigate pregnancy, birth, and finding balance in an unbalanced world. I am Angie Taylor, the mother of 9 with 2 degrees in natural health. I'm also a birth insider, knowing the ins and outs of the birth industry and all of the good, the bad, and the ugly. I've worked with expectant couples since 2003 in a variety of roles, including birth educator, birth doula, home birth midwife, breastfeeding support, and life coaching. Sit back and enjoy hearing about all the things you never knew you never knew. Today I interview Kellan Fluckiger. He is coming through decades of depression, addiction, life-threatening illness, and a near-death experience. He has become the ultimate catalyst to help motivated people melt barriers, move mountains, and mobilize superpowers to achieve their true desires. As a coach and keynote speaker, his masterful approach helps people get past old stories, change beliefs, and create a life context to reach even goals that seem impossible. Kellan, I'm so excited to have you on this episode of Your Fairy God Mentor. I feel like you are one of the gems that I have met through this process. And I really look forward to what we're going to unfold for everybody today as we talk about something that seems to be taboo in our society, and that is the importance of men being vulnerable and open with their sweethearts.
Well, thank you. And I agree. That's so important. And I want to acknowledge you for the good that you're doing, that you're choosing to work on this topic. That I love Fairy God Mentor. I love the lightness, but the seriousness of that, and the fact that you're diving into something that is important, valuable, and perhaps a bit difficult. So thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, so where to begin? I think it's such a deep topic, and it's really time for us to unbury this and talk about it.
Well, I'm a poster child for both not knowing how and learning how to do that. I was raised in a home where love was very conditional. I was only okay if I behaved a certain way. And the not okayness was expressed through very harsh discipline that today would be felony child abuse. And so I grew up with the idea that I was not okay and never would be. And I remember hiding in the locker room when I was in high school because I didn't want anyone to see I was black and blue, that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. That was really awful. And where it left me was believing that I was not okay. I learned to lie a lot to protect myself. And I also didn't know who I was. And so the idea of being vulnerable and sharing everything was anathema. It was scary. It was not okay. Because whatever I was flawed. And I lived with the whole idea that if you really knew me, you'd hate me, feeling my whole life. And so that was the approach for most of my adult life. And in the process, I went through 3 marriages and divorces. And I'm quite sure that while I did attract broken people because I was broken, I had no idea how to support or help them because I had no idea what their life experience would do to a person. Like I literally had never talked to anyone about my life experience until I was in my early 50s. I was 52. So my whole life I never did. And the women that I had relationships with, married to, I made a lot of money because I knew how to do that, but I didn't know how to be a partner. I felt like I was supposed to take care of things and make money and do that sort of traditional male macho thing. And I did that part about money pretty good, but I never even knew how to be open or vulnerable. And on top of that, I'm not even sure I knew who I was. I knew who I was supposed to be and how I was supposed to act, but I didn't know who I was.
Right. And so you had to figure that out on your own, which so many men have to. It's like I have 9 children total, and 5 of them are sons. And I've been very cognizant of helping them to understand it's okay for them to be vulnerable. It's okay for them to cry. It's okay for them to come to me when they're struggling with something. And sadly, that hasn't always been the message they've gotten from my husband. He was always the big boys don't cry kind of thing. I remember our redheaded son who left last month for his mission to Guatemala when he was a little one, and he wasn't even 2 yet. His little sister showed up on the scene, and he wanted to climb up on my lap and snuggle and nurse. And I remember telling him, yes, you could do that. But before he climbed up on my lap, he looked at me and he said, "I still a big boy?" And I thought to myself, oh, yes, you're still a big boy. It's still okay to climb up on mom's lap and cuddle and be the big boy. So being very cognizant of that. And I have been able to help my husband make some shifts in that way of thinking, but it's not always easy to do.
Well, some of the things, I'm glad you're doing this, and I want to help us all go really deep into it, because our ability as men to cry or express emotion, those are some external markers, but there's a lot more depth to it than that. And I know you know this, but I want to say it so that it's part of the conversation. To not know things, to need support, to feel like one of the things I had to learn after my 3 divorces and getting married again, and to the angel that was sent to help me when I was 52, I had to learn how to be a person. I had to learn how to have a friend. I had to learn how to tell the truth. I had to learn how to be okay needing support, needing anything. And so that it's really important to make that not only okay, but to encourage it. It's part of complete development. It's not weird, and so we have to allow for this weirdness. It's part of the complete person and beingness.
Absolutely. Yeah. And we teach girls that it's okay to look for that help. And we need to be teaching our boys, young men, and men that it doesn't change who you are. You can still be a strong man and ask for help. Our son serving in Guatemala has seen some things he wasn't prepared for, extreme poverty and such. And he was really struggling and just wanted to come home. And my husband and I were talking about it. We're like, okay, we don't want him to just come home. We don't want to just pull him out of it. What can we do to help him navigate what's going on so that we can figure out the best situation and scenario for him? And as we were talking to him, I was just like, we need to find someone that you can talk to. And he reached out on his own to the missionary mental health desk and spoke with a counselor. And I'm so proud of him for doing that. But there's a lot of men that don't think that they need to do that try to keep it all inside.
Well, they not only don't think they need to, but they think somehow if they do, there's something wrong with them. And
right.
That's, that was me all over the place. I believed, because of the abusive upbringing and the discipline and everything, that everything that happened wrong around me was my fault, that I somehow should already have known that it was coming and what to do about it. And that if something happened anyway, I should have fixed it, and shame on me for not having handled it ahead of time or immediately taken care of it, so that no one else needed to do anything. So, some version of that warped story was imprinted in my existence, and that my inability to do that in any situation for anything meant there was something wrong with me. Not that the situation was hard or that anything else, but that I sucked. Somehow I was not up to being what I ought to be, that sort of framework.
So how did that impact you as a father?
I felt like I needed to know the answer all the time. I felt like I needed to know exactly what to do. I felt like I needed to be right all the time. and that there was something wrong with me if I didn't know immediately, or if I had a moment where I didn't do the right thing or did something and thought about it later and thought, oh, gee, I need to fix that. That wasn't just human experience where you make a mistake or you do something and think it's better. It was a serious flaw, because I should already have handled that. If I was who I needed to be and what I needed to be, that wouldn't be a problem, whatever that was, whether it was language, whether it was how to handle a situation, whether it was raising a kid right, whether it was correct or incorrect discipline. I didn't even know what that was, because I had the crap beat out of me when I was growing up. So like, I knew that was wrong, and I knew I didn't want to be that, but then, okay, do what?
Right. And that's like the first lesson that parents learn when they become parents, right? Is how exactly do I do this? Especially if I was raised in an environment that I didn't like, that didn't feel right to me, then how in the world am I supposed to parent this little tiny human that comes into the world without a manual?
Right. And so how it impacted my ability to be a dad, I'm sure tremendously. Like I said, I have 10 kids, and given the addictions and divorces and everything, I've got several of them that I don't have relationships with today. They're estranged, as it were. And I have infinite patience, and I'm waiting, and that there will be a time and place for all that. But, that's how it impacted it. There it is, writ large in blood all over the wall. So, yeah, like that.
Right. So I think that is part of what leads into another situation no one wants to talk about, and that is the absent father who lives in the home. That the father who isn't sure how to be a father, doesn't know how to be a husband, and is there earning the paycheck, but not really participating in anything, and not understanding how that impacts his family, how his sweetheart feels about herself, how the children feel about themselves, why is dad so distant, and not understanding that dad has his own stuff to deal with, just like the rest of us do. And it's one of those conversations where, as parents, you get to a point with your kids where they ask you why, and your only answer is, you'll understand when you're a parent. Because it's hard to explain to them, why we do and say the things that we do. And for them to see that it is because we love them, that we're trying to make the best choices, that we possibly can under whatever circumstances get thrown at us. But when we then throw into it our own experiences, how we were raised, what we were raised believing, that we may or may not have come to understand isn't truth, or is only partial truth. There's a lot going on in the brain when we're parents, trying to figure out what's the best way for me to raise my kids so they don't turn out as messed up as I am.
So I think one of the things that I would have used a lot more, like 1,000 times more, 1,000,000 times more, are 3 words that I have now discovered are the most powerful and effective words in the world. And it's not "I love you," it's "I don't know." I don't know. This is what's going on. Let's figure this out. Mm-hmm. I would do that a lot more. And that was the great discovery, one of the great discoveries, because that was not okay to not know. Mm-hmm. And it was not okay as a mortal sin, not as an inconvenience.
Right.
And not knowing, not having it together, it was mortal sin. Mm-hmm. I'm not saying it is, I'm saying in the context of my universe, right? It was, and I need, that can't be. And so operating from that framework, and at the same time feeling like I didn't know so much, presented a conflict that was really painful for me.
Right, because we've been taught that parents know everything.
Well, not only they know everything, but then I don't do all the stuff. I mean, I don't know. I imagine every kid feels this but parents are God, they're perfect, and they know everything. And somewhere along the line, we figure out that's not true. But the way that I was raised, with a combination of religious zeal and physical abuse and emotional and all the rest that goes with it, I sort of internalized the feeling that, well, someday when I really get it together, then I'll be as good as they are, instead of I'll be what I need to be, and they'll need to be on their own journey, and hopefully they'll get okay too as they work on themselves. That idea of they need to be working on themselves never got into my conversation until I was in my mid-50s, not in my 20s when it should have.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm with you there, because it isn't. I remember I was raised by a single mom with my 5 sisters, and mom just knew everything, you know. I don't recall her ever saying, well, I don't know, but I'm sure that she had the same feelings that you did, of feeling like she needed to know. She needed to have all of the answers for us, because she was a single mom on her own, and needed to give us this sense of security that mom knew what was going on in the world and could help us with anything, even though I'm sure that there were a lot of things that came up that she had no idea how she was going to handle it.
The key, the dilemma we've outlined clearly: the expectation to know, the not knowing, the fallacies and flaws and errors and sins and bad things that parents do, dumb things, because they don't know, the hiding and denial of those things because they're supposed to know. I mean, I've had not very many, 1 or 2 conversations with my mom about how she treated me. She was the principal administrator of the discipline, even though my dad was home. She's the one that beat the crap out of me. Ask her about it and talked about it, and she has revisionist history. She doesn't remember many things that I remember clearly that she said, things that happened, you know, doesn't remember them, or remembers them so differently. And you know, truth be told, she grew up. I mean, there were 3 older kids and 3 younger kids, and the 3 older kids, especially my older sister, I was the second, got the ultimate absolute brutality. And when I used to see my sister get beat, it just, I was torn between rage and helplessness. Like, at least I thought, well, I'm a boy. Okay, if you beat me, that's one thing. You're doing this to a girl. Like, you can't do that. And I realized that kind of separation's not okay these days. But I looked at her and I thought, what do you know, that kind of feeling in my heart. But anyway, the younger kids, as I wrote about my own story in the book Tightrope of Depression, they don't, the younger kids read it, and some of them read it and don't believe it. They deny it and argue with it. And I understand their point of view, because in those years somewhere my mom grew up, and their growing up experience was quite different than mine. So, you know, the difference is, I don't know the difference. One important thing, one of my younger sisters read the book and said, why can't you just forgive whatever she did? Because she didn't have those experiences. And something that's really important is there's a difference, a significant and meaningful difference between forgiving someone, which means allowing for humanity and letting them be on their own developmental course and not resisting the things that life presents to you, and dealing with the shaping or the molding that particular things did to you. So, example I have is a dog. I had a dog that came into, I haven't had a dog growing up. My mom hated house animals, so we didn't have one. But I got a dog when I was right after the beginning of my own transformation, when I was 50 something. First dog I'd ever had. I had a dog. When the dog was a puppy, probably 4 or 5 months old, New Year's Eve, 2007, going into 2008, dog was in the house. We were roughhousing, and I wasn't careful, and the dog bumped into a speaker stand where a speaker was on. The speaker fell off. It was one of those side speakers, like in a surround thing, and fell on the dog's foot. And the edge of the speaker fell on the dog's foot. It broke all the metatarsals, and the dog was howling. And on New Year's Eve, we had to take it to the emergency vet and sew it up, and do all this stuff, operate. And they did everything they could. But they told us, you know, be in a cast for a few weeks, may never heal correctly, and may have a limp later, et cetera, et cetera. So the dog eventually had a limp. When it ran too much, or when it got too cold, especially in the later years of his life, he had a limp. Now the dog, you know, dogs don't carry grudges. So the dog was fine, and the dog lived his life joyfully. And when it had a limp, it limped. He limped, and But that was just life. So I didn't worry about it. So as far as forgiveness goes, the dog forgave immediately and completely. But the dog never had to quit dealing with the consequences of the accident.
Right.
And the question from my sister just demonstrates the lack of understanding. Forgiveness on my part or the dog's part of the perpetrator or the cause of the accident or whatever it was has nothing to do with the fact that there's a limp. And you have to deal with the limp. Like, there it is, and it is there. And for the dog, it was till he passed, which was 4 years ago. And so, that shaping, I call it the shaping that the circumstances of my life have lasted into my adulthood until I finally took responsibility and started talking to people and doing something in my 50s. So for all those years, when I left home at 17, 52, 35 years, I was alone dealing with this on my own. And I had to finally figure out how to do something with it. So the idea of why don't you just forgive is missing the point. I can do that, but it has nothing to do with the limp.
Right. Right. It's that same comment of, just get over it. And people not understanding that. What do you mean just get over it? It's like telling anybody, whether it's you or anybody who's had any type of trauma in their life, just get over it. It is missing that very point, that I can forgive that individual, but I still have this stuff that I've got to deal with.
Right.
That I have to find a way to heal through, to find the lessons to learn from, so that I can be a better person and a better human to others.
Yeah. So I call all that stuff the limp in my context, because the dog had a limp till he died.
Yeah, I like that. It's a great analogy. It helps people to understand that we can't just get over it. Very seldom can someone just get over something. And if they tell you that they're over it, they don't feel safe telling you the truth.
Yeah, they're lying.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying it has to be permanent. Eventually you can mitigate, get over stuff. I mean, the power of change is real. Change is real. Things can actually happen and change, and we know that. But it's not related to, and is a much longer process than making a choice to no longer be angry, frustrated, negative, demand justice from, or whatever about forgiveness.
Right. So what would the world be like, do you think, if we all just acknowledge the fact that 100% of humans walking the earth today have experienced some form of trauma? What if we just treated each other with respect and love, knowing that there's trauma there?
Well, I just finished yesterday editing a book, which will be out in February, called Forgiveness, A Journey of Courage to a Place of Freedom and Power. And I think it'll be out in February or March. And I was exploring the whole idea that the notion that somehow we have to, that it's our place so that we're even capable of demanding justice for things that were done to us, or anything else. Like if we were willing to just live in that love and let people be where they are and do what we can to help them on the way, that would be an enormous, like, we don't have the words to describe the ripples of that kind of change.
I agree. I think that the change and the ripples would be so enormous and so impactful that we would be living in a completely different world than we live in now. Instead of, right now, everybody is playing the blame game.
Mm-hmm.
And instead of looking at each other and just acknowledging that I have trauma, you have trauma, everybody has trauma, we're doing the best that we can. We're all looking for ways to heal our trauma. Well, most of us are looking for ways to heal our trauma. Some are still living in denial, or feeling like there's something broken with them because they can't just, quote unquote, get over it. Instead, we really just need to love each other where we are and give each other the safe space to speak our truth without judgment, without shame, and helping each other to remove those feelings of guilt because of the things that we've done as a consequence or subsequently because of the way that we were traumatized.
One of the phrases that I wish people would get rid of is, yeah, but this is different.
Yeah.
Everybody all the time, I don't know, I'm generalizing. So often people will hear what you're saying or what I'm saying, and they'll say, yeah. Oh, sounds great. Yep, yeah, but this is different. And they get the idea that somehow whatever they've experienced is different, worse, something, an exception to, et cetera, et cetera. If we could just eliminate that. Yeah, but this is different. No, it's not. I don't care what it is. And I don't care who did what to whom. It's not any different. It may be bigger. The rock may be bigger that fell on your head than the one that fell on the other person's or mine or whatever. But the process is the same. And the notion that, yeah, but it's different is the thing that lets us cling to the need we have to either be to continue to play the victim, which is sad because as long as I play the victim, it limits my ability to love and serve other people because I'm busy holding on to the victimness, or to cling viciously to the need for someone to be punished, for there to be some retribution or judgment that I alone can determine the scope of. As long as I have a big space in my soul for that lust for revenge or justice or something, or the nobody knows the trouble I've seen but Jesus victimhood, there's a big chunk of me that is out of commission when it comes to discovering, developing, and serving with the divine gifts we all have and the opportunity we have to love and be of service in the world.
I totally agree. When I divorced my first husband, I had a sweet friend who knew the whole story, and she and her boyfriend kept having each other arrested in a way of getting back at each other. Well, he did this last weekend, so I'm going to do this to him this weekend. And I'm like, what are you doing? You're caught in this vicious cycle. She's like, don't you ever just want to get revenge on your ex? I'm like, no, there's absolutely nothing that I can do to him that will come anywhere close to what will end up in his life should he choose to continue down this current path. It's not my job to punish him. It's my job to heal from what happened. So
that choice is, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Well, just when we get stuck in that mindset of vengeance, you can't shut your heart down to humanity without shutting it down to Heavenly Father, God, universe, whatever people acknowledge is greater than themselves.
We limit our ability to do good. We shrivel up. We're a tenth of what we could be.
Right.
And that's not by way of recrimination. It's just a fact. If you or I want to be all that we can be and do all that we can do in the world, it requires that we let go of all the baggage we don't need. And that is bitterness and anger toward anyone else, or vicious self-loathing toward myself for whatever I did. I mean, I was an awful partner. I was married and divorced 3 times. I was a drug addict in and out of rehab. If I carry, and I've got kids that don't want to talk to me. So those are the facts. And they used to drive me to distraction, and it got in the way of healing, and it got in the way of doing good, and it got in the way of all kinds of stuff. Okay, well, I can live with that getting in the way, however much it does, however long I want to live like that, or I can let it go, make a choice to forgive myself, leave justice in the hands of God, be a loving, kind person, serve all that I can around me, and then stop worrying about it, which is a lot more beneficial for me, a lot more beneficial for whoever I can help, and leaves the choice about reconciliation and future growth the only place that it belongs, which is in the hands of those who have yet to choose.
Totally agree. Absolutely, 100%. And the world will be so amazing when we all get that.
Which is why I make all the noise that I can. It's why I write all the books that I do, which is why I had recorded episode 585 of the podcast of mine this morning, which is why I write the music that I do. My commitment after my own healing and divine interventions and otherworldly manifestations and everything else is just to help. My goal right now is 10 million people discover, develop, and serve with their divine gifts. So I'm going to help 10 million people do that. I don't know how. I got books and podcasts and music and coaching programs and this and that and the other. And it's all aimed at that, because I figured out what it's like to be healed that way and to get busy and to do good, add good to the world. So that's the mission that I'm on.
I love that. I absolutely love that. And I pray that I'm able to help feed into that by helping to bring men back into their rightful place in the birth space, and inviting them in. Some men that I have worked with have been very reluctant, because they've been told so many times it's not where you belong, but it is exactly where he belongs. And when it happens, and he knows it's okay for him to be vulnerable, it's okay for him to be worried about his wife, it's okay for him to cry when he watches her go through the birthing process. It changes her, it alters her, not just within herself, but within the way that he views her. When he can understand that there's going to be this great big change happen just through a single birth process, and that it's okay, and it's normal, and it's natural. I have watched marriages heal. I have watched men become closer to their children, because they get it. They finally understand their role in the family.
Well, I agree. And I can't imagine why anyone would teach anyone that unity in that process is anything but the absolute place that we need to be. I mean, I know in the old days, kick the man out while the woman had the kid, but we certainly don't do that anymore, I hope. I mean, I was there for the birth of all 10 of mine, and did everything I could, went to the classes and learned how to do breathing and Lamaze and the whole, everything there ever was for all of them. And even doing that, knowing that I was supposed to be supportive of that, that was in the context of how I was not okay myself. Of course I'm supposed to do that. I'm going to do the very best I can at it, because I'm supposed to do that. And I still had that was minimum. I need to do that. I need to do that. Of course I need to do that. But it wasn't in the context of who I was being in my heart. It was in the context of what I'm supposed to do. And if I knew how to do anything, I knew how to do what I was supposed to do.
Living up to the expectations.
I knew I could do that because that's who I am. But when the lights went out, when I was left alone, I didn't know who the flip I was.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and there are more and more dads wanting to catch their babies now, wanting to be that person instead of watching a doctor or a midwife do it and then get handed the child. One of the frustrating things for me when COVID hit the world was the number of couples that she had to choose between having her husband with her in the hospital room or having a doula with her, and listening to midwives talk about, we're going to go into their home and we're going to have all of these rules and she's going to have to choose. I'm like, it's her home. How would you feel if someone came into your home and told you as you're giving birth that you can't even have your husband or children in the room because of this thing that nobody fully understands?
Yeah.
So we've been rocked to our core, I think. A lot of people are looking for something deeper right now, a better understanding of all things, especially themselves, because we've had to spend so much time in our homes with each other. And I'm sure that there have been divorces happen, but I also hope that there have been marriages that have been strengthened because they've been forced to be together and to talk and get to know each other a little bit better. I don't know. I don't know what the statistics are on that front with everything that's been going on, but that's my hope.
Well, it certainly created the opportunity for that. And I think for the opportunity for a lot of family dynamic to change. We have so many forces previously that were pulling everything apart, with so much to do and so many places for everybody to go and be entertained or demanded all separately in their own direction with whatever feels good to me, that this sort of enforced isolation together, in family units, and your circle has certainly been an opportunity. And I guess that how useful it's been is going to depend on the mindset. I find that in coaching. I mean, people come to me and they want a certain outcome. They want something in their life to be different. their business, their money, their relationship. They want something different. They're not happy with how it is. And okay, you can have that. And here are the steps. Here's what needs to happen. And a person that really wants it can say, okay, let's get started. And someone who thinks there's a sauce that you pour on your life to fix everything says, oh, I didn't know I had to do that. And so it really is going to depend on the mindset of the people involved.
Right. And mindset is so important. How do you explain that to people? That there are still people that don't understand even what the term mindset means. So how do you explain that to people?
Well, I have lots of examples, and one of the superpowers I have is as I talk to someone, I'm blessed with the ability to understand them energetically and to then draw from everything they have said examples that will allow me to tell them a story about their own stuff that will illustrate mindset. Well, when you said this, how did this feel? How did that feel? What was the difference? And to use examples from their own, like I don't even talk about coaching or a coaching relationship or any of that until I've talked to somebody for at least an hour or two or three, maybe one or two or three different conversations. And the reason I don't is because I don't know I don't know enough about them. I don't know what they want. I don't know who they are. I don't know what they're willing to do. And before I can actually be of service and help somebody with making a significant shift in their life, I need to know what's going on. And so I do it by listening. And then I happen to be able to remember stuff and use everything they're saying. I won't say use it against them, use it to illustrate the things that they are struggling with and the opportunities, really. I use it for them, re-describe things that they've told me in a way that it's really clear to them in their own life from their own story. So I don't have a thing over there I talk about. I draw it out of them so that we can use things that are part of their life and experience to illustrate stuff that in their hearts they know anyway. And I'm not afraid, and I say things, boldly and clearly, and people get it.
I love that. Yeah. I had a conversation this morning with a woman who had a traumatic birth experience last year. And she had shared with me, well, I'm emotionally, I'm over it. And then in the very next sentence, it was, I'm afraid that, and just like, then emotionally, you're not over it. Emotionally, you haven't worked through it because there's always layers to trauma. So there's still work to be done. And I'm completely on board with you with needing to have different conversations with them. The longer you talk with someone, the more relaxed they become, the more open they become, the more that you get to see who they really are, and what they're really looking for. I know as a La Leche League leader, when I was supporting women in their breastfeeding journey, we were always told the first question they ask you, is it really the question they're called to ask? Their first question is kind of like a test question. They want to know, will you just answer my question, or are you going to give me your agenda? And that's who we are as human beings. We really want to know, is this person really going to talk to me and see me, or are they going to insert their agenda into all of this?
Well, I love that thought. And since you started with the idea of inviting men to be vulnerable and to be part of the entire life experience, whether it's birth or raising children or having a true partnership with your partner, including the vulnerability required when you don't know what to do and you think you're going to fail and all the rest. As I started with, I'm a poster child for moving from one extreme to a place of very centered wholeness. I want to speak to any men who are listening to this and invite you. I don't care what structure or principles you had before. two things. If you're honest in your quiet time with yourself, you know that the truth isn't that you're supposed to be and know and do everything. You're on a journey from not being whole and complete or perfect to try to get there. We're on a journey of growth. And we started there as a kid and we grow there all through our lives. And somewhere we get these stories that we're supposed to have made leaps and advances that happen somehow in the shadows, in the cracks, without them actually happening. That's not true. I have never felt more safe, more empowered, more capable, and more connected to life, to my mission as a man and a provider or a service giver or whatever than I feel now. And I have never been more vulnerably connected to a woman, the woman that I'm married to the divine, and in a vulnerable way. One of my favorite scriptures that I've listened to hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times, 3 times this morning, was John chapter 17, the great intercessory prayer that Jesus offers. There is true power, not in isolation, but in connectedness. And I couldn't invite you with more powerful words and feelings than to drop the pretenses and the excuses and figure out what you need to do to love yourself enough to find the tools and processes you need to connect deeply with your spouse, with your children, with your God, and with the true person you know you can be, which does require humility, vulnerability, growth, and all of the rest.
Love that, Kellan. Thank you. That is amazing. I'm trying not to cry. It's so important for men to hear those words, for them to know that the best way to connect with a woman is to be open and to show her who you really are. It is the deepest part of a woman. That's what she wants. That's what she needs. Most women are not superficial. We're looking for someone to go deep with us. And so I appreciate you being open and sharing those words.
Well, I know that my I said I was married and divorced 3 times, and those came from a failure to do that, either understand that I needed to, or not knowing how to, or any reason, right? I didn't know how to. I didn't know that I needed to. I thought I was supposed to XYZ, and the truth is, you just need to be a person. Okay, you need to be an open, vulnerable, honest person who's on a journey from birth to death, on a birth to the next life, through this little speck of eternity here. That's what we're really doing.
Mm-hmm.
And so enjoy it, participate in it, go all in. The roller coaster does go up and down, and it does require you to be joyfully. It doesn't require, I have to be open. It's a joyful revelation to drop the defenses and acquire the blessing of a true partnership. But in order to have that, you have to be willing to be open, as you've talked about.
Yes, and vulnerable, willing to say those words, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know where we go from here. I don't know, where we're going. I don't know what we're doing. We'll figure it out together.
Mm-hmm.
It's very important.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, Kellan, I have enjoyed this conversation with you, and I'm wondering, do you have anything special that you'd like to offer to the audience, to those that hear this podcast?
Well, I don't know if your audience is principally members of the church. We both happen to belong to the same church, although that's not why we were connected and not why we are making this podcast, because 90% of my clients are not members of the faith, the LDS faith that we belong to. Um, so here's what I would say. In the journey that I described briefly, I mean, if you want details, you can read Tightrope of Depression, my journey from darkness, despair, and death to light, love, and life. You can read the sequel, Down from the Gallows. You can read When I Died 3.5 years ago in the University of Alberta Medical Center. My heart stopped and I had 3 conversations with God at the door between life and eternity. You can read all the details if you want. But here's what I want to leave you with. I don't care where you've been, because I've been some dark places. I tried suicide a couple of times. I was a $3,000 a week cocaine addict. I mean, all kinds of crazy stuff. I was excommunicated twice. All of the things that are the most horrible, awful things you can imagine happening in the context of our journey, the understanding we have of our journey from doctrine. It doesn't matter where you have been, and it doesn't matter what has come before. And I say that from someone who has been there and walked this path. It is never too late to matter. It is never too late to say, oh, I'm going to take a different road. My changes didn't start until I was in my 50s. So I spent 35 years from 40 years in depression, 13 to 52, before I started even doing anything about it. 35 years out of the house, trying to live up to what I imagined were expectations that weren't true and real, living up to some things I thought I was supposed to do. My point in saying all that isn't poor me. It's that it's never too late. Never. So whatever you have to do, and wherever it goes, take control of the levers of your life, of the intimacy with your spouse, of the relationships with your kids. I said, I got still stuff to fix, but I know it's going to happen. I know that. And so it's never too late. Don't give up. You know where that road goes, nowhere. So why would we stay on that road?
I love that. Yep. It is the beautiful message of the gospel.
Mm-hmm.
It's never too late.
Mm-hmm.
There is it. We can always turn around and go the other direction. We can turn left and we can turn right and see where that takes us. And there's always someone to help us, to lead, guide, and direct us. Right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, I want to honor you for having this conversation. Again, I want to thank you for the opportunity to talk to your folks. Anyone that wants to talk to me, I'm really easy to find. Kellan Fluckiger is a weird name. You can find me, Google my name. I have thousands of hits because of my executive career, my coaching, all over all the social media. I'm really easy to find. So if anybody has any itch to chat, I'm really easy to find. All the books that I've written are on Amazon. Anything that I can do to serve you and to help you see your true potential and to live into it, I'm in.
Thank you so much, Kellan, for being here on this episode. I am excited to get this released out into the world, and just for men to hear what you have to say and to help invite them to be vulnerable, be in the relationship and connected. In all their relationships, not just with their sweetheart, but, with their own parents, with their children, with their friends. And it's time for us to go deeper and to grow closer together.
I agree with that. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. To learn more about me, your fairy god mentor, simply go to angietaylorfairygodmentor.com.